It's time to boost your startup. Over 90% of SaaS startups fail. Only 35% get past the 10-year mark, and only 40% of these ever become profitable. Okay, I think we might have just lost half the audience. But don't go anywhere, because to help you avoid product failure, we're talking to the local startup guru, Renier Kriel. Renier, welcome to the Digital Fireside Chat. Pull up. It's winter. All I need now is a sizzling noise and the crackling fire in the background.
Awesome. Good to be here, Andrew. Thanks for having me. Love your fire.
Let's keep the fire burning. Renier, bro, you've been around the mountain, and I mean that in a good way. You've built a number of successful businesses, which some you've sold. You've headed up different tech incubators. You've done some coaching, some consulting. You've launched your own newsletter, your own podcast. So you've got the battle scars. And I know today you're actually consulting with business leaders, helping them to take a strategic giant step forward. And I like your LinkedIn tagline: help startups move fast. Renier, you've got a
That's what
lot
you
of
try and do.
energy. Did I miss anything out?
No, I think you might have underplayed all of the different failures, trying different things, launching them, and not seeing them really take off. But yeah, I've been involved in quite a few different things and had a lot of fun being involved in them.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to unpacking that. I think knowing you for a few years, if I had to describe you, and see you putting your seatbelt on here, not knowing what's going to come next, I would say Renier is a man of practical wisdom, fresh ideas, who wants to see you win. And I like that. I think we've got that in common. We want to see others win. So thanks for making the time. I think when I first bumped into you, were heading up 4i Mobile, which was really focused on building mobile apps.
Yeah.
And from memory, you broke some new ground there, building and pioneering some of the first apps in South Africa. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so it was actually a bit of a coincidence, to be honest. I studied engineering, and after working for 10 months for a big research institute, I got really bored. And then I pulled three mates together that were software developers, and we started a software consultancy. And after, with the first client, and it's quite easy, but actually to start a consultancy, it's way easier than most people think. Like, if you have someone that can deliver a skill like software development and you can get your first client, you're almost on your way, right? And that's what we did. And when that first client's project was done, we kind of ran low on clients, and we had a bit of a tough time. It was during the global economic downturn in 2009, so it was a bit hard to make sales, which I didn't understand at the time. I just thought it was really hard, but it was exceptionally hard given the economic circumstances. And someone asked us if we want to build an iPhone app for them. So the App Store launched 2 months, the iOS App Store launched 2 months before that. We said, yeah, sure, we can build an app. We'll figure it out. First problem we ran into is we didn't own a Mac computer, and you had to, the SDK only worked on a Mac. So we had to buy a Mac. So we bought a second-hand Mac for next to nothing, but it was a French Mac. So the keyboard wasn't a standard English keyboard. So our developer had to navigate around keys being in different places. But we built our first iPhone app when on iOS 2.3, which was, I think, about 6 months after the first App Store launch. The App Store launched on iOS 2. So we launched that app, and it was, I don't believe it was the first app in South Africa, but it featured, you could buy, it's an app called Power Time. You could buy prepaid electricity using your credit card on a mobile app. And it was quite convenient because it stored the credit card details, and you can just open the app and buy it. And then from there, a lot of people came to us and say, hey, we also want to build an app. And that was really the era, very similar to now. Everybody's saying, hey, do you have ChatGPT integrated? Do you use ChatGPT? Here's 10 ways to use ChatGPT. That's pretty much how it was back then for mobile apps, right? Everybody had an app idea. Everybody needs an app. And because we were one of the first, we got quite a lot of attention. So we ended up building the first apps for Takealot. So Takealot.com was the first, we built their first app for iOS, Android, and BlackBerry 10, believe it or not. BlackBerry 10 was the thing back then. Yes. And then we built apps for MTN South Africa, so all of the prepaid apps. We built ShopRite and Checkers' first apps, and a bunch of other ones. So really catching that early wave of when apps was a big thing. And then, yeah, I think one of the big challenges is we didn't see that wave ending when it subsided a bit. So we went through that as well. But yeah, very early in the app game, and it was quite nice to witness both the economic downturn and the app development phase, because both of those are things that you can see happening again, right? So the world is facing what could be a global economic turndown or downturn. And, having gone through it before, there's some learnings from that. And then also looking at, new ways of technology becoming mainstream. I think AI and the evolution of AI and the pace at which things are rolling out now, it has a very similar feel to what we've experienced when mobile apps became a big thing back in 2010, 2011.
And what, that's quite a ride. So you've been an early adopter like that. So you're probably building apps for the iPhone 3, I imagine, or even the original version. I mean, that's fresh
Yeah,
off
the
the
iPhone
boat.
3G. It was called the iPhone
3G,
3G. It was the
yes.
first iPhone with 3G.
Yeah, wow. Do you still have one of those in your cupboard?
She's somewhere. I don't think it works anymore. But yeah, we still have the old Mac, the French Mac with the missing key and the upside down keys, and that's still around. So
Put that in
bit
the
of a souvenir.
museum.
Yeah.
What would you say, being an early adopter, pioneering, building mobile apps, not having a lot of reference points? What are some of the
Hmm.
biggest mistakes you made in those early days?
So I think a big mistake is really, or one of the mistakes at least, is really misunderstanding what is opportunity that's coming to you because of hype, and what is opportunity coming to you because you're building stuff that's valuable, right? So a lot of the work we got was because of hype in the mobile app space, and that can very much make you lazy. You can focus less on value because it's easy to make sales, and you get an operational mode and you just keep servicing clients, and one thing to the next. So instead of focusing on really diving into what is it that makes these apps valuable, we built apps. And a lot of them failed, unfortunately. But that, I think, the same applies now when we in this AI wave. If I were to launch an agency now, claiming that we are great at helping you integrate GPT-4 and other AI tools into your business workflow, chances are I'll get a lot of interest and I'll probably be able to land a lot of clients. Now, whether I end up helping these clients be successful will determine whether or not that agency succeeds or not in the long term. But there is a trap for people doing this, that you have to be aware of what is hype cycle and what is actual value. And I think the good thing is one should ride and use these hype cycles, right? So there's definitely some benefit for everybody to catch out of it. But I think, in business, we have a responsibility to utilize that hype cycle, but then actually focus on making sure we deliver value, because that's what will make this sustainable in the long run. And that's obviously, the promises we put out to clients. So I think, being in my 20s, being young, being inexperienced, we didn't really discern between what was hype and what was value.
Very good, eh? Wow. And from there, you basically jumped into the incubator space. I think you ended up selling 4i, and I think I've been on an incubator myself, or a bootcamp accelerator. What is a good, given your own pain points and frustrations that you've just been talking about, what does a good incubator do for you? What does that
Yeah,
look
so
like?
I think a good incubator, in having ran 3 seasons at the incubator I was heading, called French South African Tech Labs in Cape Town. The first thing is accountability, right? So being a founder, working for yourself, there's no real set pace that you get measured by, right? So if you delay sending an email to a customer by 2 days, no one's going to know. Your business might fail because of it, but you can easily blame some other reason, right? So one of the biggest challenges that founders, and specifically solo founders, which a lot of founders in South Africa are for some reason, have, is that accountability to go, you know what, I said this week we're going to reach out to 5 potential customers, and that's what I'm going to do. And it's really, what I've seen is, it's in those forcing yourself beyond the comfortable where you really learn how to do things well, right? So you mentioned I'm busy building a newsletter. We've got certain targets around how we want to grow the newsletter. We believe it adds a lot of value to people, and we want people to read the content and benefit from it. But we've got some targets that we're working towards, right? And those targets are always stretching, right? And when we refuse to give up on chasing those targets, that's where we get new creative ways of getting people to sign up, getting people, or in different business cases, getting customers, right? So the first thing that a good incubator does is it offers accountability to people. So it helps them make commitments, and helps keep them honest towards those commitments. So how we did that in the incubator was a weekly check-in. So every week we'll ask 3 questions: what's your revenue? What's keeping you stuck? What are you doing next week? Right? And if you ask someone for 4 weeks in a row, what's your revenue, and I have to answer 0 every week, they get tired of doing that, and then they figure out a way to make some revenue. Even if it's a company that has to build product first before doing revenue, they figure out a way to hustle to do it just so they can answer your question. So I think the accountability is a really good thing.
And
I
just
think,
on that, Renier, sorry to interrupt there. How soon do you expect them to be revenue generating?
so look, it's really a case-by-case situation. For hardware startups, you would imagine it's a longer turnaround time because they're going to take some time to build some kind of hardware product. For software startups, a lot of them actually, if you think about it, right, the tech is only an enabler of what they're trying to do, right? So most technologies today, even we can use Uber as an example. Most people know Uber. So Uber, the function that it delivers, the value that it offers to me as a client, or rather the problem it solves for me is taking me from point A to point B. Okay, so now that existed in the days before we had cars, right? Someone could borrow me his horse and I can go from point A to point B. Now obviously with technology a lot of things have evolved, but now looking at Uber, they're saying, look, there is this problem that people want to move from point A to point B and I have no means of doing that. Can we introduce tech that helps connect these people and scale it, right? So technically, if someone was to build a startup like Uber, they could start building the startup without actually building the tech, right? They could go, let's make this a WhatsApp bot. If someone not a real bot, act as if it's a bot, advertise it to a few people and say, hey, if you want to ride into town, why don't you WhatsApp us and drop a pin of your location, and we'll send a driver your way, right? So they drop a pin. I go, cool, it's going to cost you 50 Rand. Here's a payment link. So I use there's a lot of providers that offer these credit card payment things. I think Yoko has one of them. But then you can use one of those tools, and then they pay 50 Rand as soon as you confirm they've paid. You say, cool, a driver is on the way, and that person shares a live location, picks up the person, fulfills the service, done. Now, if you do that sufficient amount of time and you get customers coming back, then you can tell yourself, looks like I've got a business, okay? You take that business case and you raise funding on that, and then you go and build the technology. Right. So that is just the way of thinking that often helps people get over that hurdle of raising funding on an idea. Because a lot of people have an idea and they go, cool, I need to build an app to do that. Right. Whereas if you hustle a bit and you figure out, okay, how do I deliver the end result value without actually having to build any code? And the example I gave is an example of that. Now, it doesn't work for all kinds of startups, but it does work for quite a few different ones. Now, I've recently helped a client launch an entire business concept using Google Forms, Google Sheets, and Data Studio, which is now renamed to Looker Studio, and a WhatsApp group, right? So you got people to fill in a form, participate in a game. The results of the game was processed in a leaderboard in Google Sheets that was presented on a dashboard on Data Studio, and on WhatsApp we had the chat element that created a bit of hype and shared with people what's happening in a game, etc. And it grew to a few hundred users before we wrote any code. And at that point, you learned a lot about like what do people want, how do they want it, what do they enjoy about this, what are some of the sensitive points that we need to nail. So when you actually started investing in developing code, the actual product you built up front, or for the first product build, was significantly closer than what it would have been had he not gone through these kind of experiments. Now, the hard thing about it is there's no clear cut. I can't tell you always use Google Sheets or always use WhatsApp. That's really where you need to get creative and really be pragmatic around like, okay, what is the essence of the problem we're solving, and how can we solve it in a different way using no code or a concierge service? That's what we call it. Like that's like where you pretend you're a WhatsApp bot. So you act as a concierge on the other side of a chat service. And a lot of people avoid this because they go, oh, it's a lot of work. I need to have my phone and reply. Yes, exactly. But it's going to help you learn a lot and save you a substantial amount of money in not wasting money building things that users won't use or things that aren't going to work.
Yeah, excellent. I love that. So you're basically giving them tools to practice, experiment, and I think, like you said, revenue is probably the litmus test, the ultimate test. If people are willing to pay, you've got a good product on your hands. Or maybe in the case of your game leaderboard scenario, if you're seeing good user adoption, that's also a sign that you're onto something.
Yeah, okay. So typically we'll measure it on, are people giving you something of value, right? Now, money is the ultimate test of that, right? Because a lot of people, if you put money to something, then you really believe in it and you back it, right? But sometimes, giving time is also something of value. And the social media platforms know this, right? Me spending a few hours on social media, which I don't do. But if I were to do that, there's a certain amount of value for a company. And, on the back of that, it's pretty obvious. They monetize that through ad spend. So that's really, are people willing to give you something of value? Are they willing to spend time on your solution, spend time in your WhatsApp chat room, pay for something? That's the best kind. If someone's willing to pay for something, they're in. And preferably someone you don't know, like a random stranger that finds your site, finds your solution, or get told by someone else at school that is willing to actually put a credit card details in and pay for the service. That's a very good early indicator that you might be onto something.
I love that, because if I look back, the amount of people who've approached us to build an app, and it's really come from the founder's idea, and it hasn't really been validated. And I think to jump and launch into an expensive exercise of building something and you don't know if it's going to get the traction is very dangerous and can be very expensive. So I like that. So we talked about accountability, we talked about experiments to validate. What are some of the other things a good incubator will do for a new startup?
Yeah, so I think I'll do a double one. One thing is something that's probably not such a good idea. A lot of incubators focus around program and content, right? And whilst program and content is always good, if you force people to attend it, they might watch the right content at the wrong time, wasting their time. And that's typically very hard to get right. So what we used to do is we would create content and have a library of content, but not make it mandatory to watch it. We'll just go whenever we have a session with someone and they go, "Oh, I'm stuck around figuring out how to do my product market fit." We'll chat about that, but we'll direct them to a specific video and go watch this and let's do a follow-up session and figure out where you're at with this specific concept. So I putting down if an incubator or accelerator program is content heavy, that's almost a flag for me to say, I think they're focusing on the stuff on the wrong kind of things. They're focusing on finishing a program instead of helping the startup succeed. And then something which I think is good is being really pragmatic in approach, right? So each startup is completely different. The founding team is completely different. The circumstances in which they operate, hardware, software, different tech stacks, B2B, B2C. So if you have a team of experienced people that can coach and guide these people, but in a pragmatic way, I think the chances of success are significantly higher, given that whilst there is structure in building a startup, or at least some kind of general direction that works better than others, each startup is so different that you need someone that can pragmatically help them direct in the right way. And then the final thing that I think is really valuable is community and learning from other people. So often what we would do is we would pull in founders, working on different startups into one room and then go, cool, we're having a session where you're talking about issues you're facing, right? So a guy would say, I'm having trouble converting clients on my website, right? So then instead of me giving my opinion, I'll ask the 3 other founders in the room, how would you solve that? Or how did you solve that for your startup? And whilst some of them haven't even solved it for their startups, they had great insights on what people could try and do. And that was really good, right? Because inherently, if you think about it, startup people are ideas people. They're generally more inclined to hustle, and people that are more inclined to hustle are more inclined to come up with creative ways to solve things, right? So in conversation with other founders, you gain so much because they actually share how they would have done it, how they think about the problem. So we created these events where they would come together. Now this can be in different ways. Y Combinator, which is a very famous incubator or accelerator, at least in America, and now operates remotely and across the world. They've got these founder dinners, so they'll invite a founder like Mark Zuckerberg or someone prominent to come and speak at a dinner. But at the dinner table, you'll have 10 founders sitting around the table, and these guys would typically network and get to know each other and share ideas on how to solve the different problems that they're facing. So the networking part, the accountability part, being pragmatic. I think those things are absolutely key in making it work. And then the final thing is just a relationship to help them make progress. Do you know someone where they can raise funding from? Do you know if it's B2B? Do you know a client that they could potentially run a pilot at? Like those things are really valuable.
Excellent. Yeah, I love the community and the mentoring from just people who have already done it before and the lessons that they can share to encourage these new startup founders. So I think that's brilliant. To what degree do you think these accelerators create a dependency on good quality coaches and mentors to get students, given that it's quite a custom approach? Like you
Yeah,
say, every new startup's unique,
yeah.
and it's not necessarily a given formula.
So I think something that's very interesting with Y Combinator, right? I do feel they've got a good program and they've got a good setup, but they also, I think the thing that counts most in their favor is the fact that they've got a really good name, right? So they like Ivy League accelerator. So now what that does, it is almost creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So the best founders now want to go to YC, right? So now one can argue, well, is it a fact that the best talent go there, or is it the best program and best mentor? A mentorship network. And I think it might be a combination, but they do find themselves in a very interesting position, right? So they attract the best talent, and therefore they get great results, which kind of means that they keep on attracting great talent. It's like a university with a good name. It's Harvard, it's Oxford, it's MIT, those kind of institutions. One could argue that the programs are good, but you can also argue the best people, most talented people go there. So I think that's one thing that is quite interesting about this space in terms of getting to that point. I think Y Combinator did an amazing job at getting people that really understand how to do it. So Paul Graham, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Paul Graham, and if any of the essays he's ever written about startups is worth reading. Then Sam Altman is now heading OpenAI. He was involved in Y Combinator in the early days. Sam Altman, by the way, doesn't take any salary, or I'm not sure about salary, but doesn't have equity in OpenAI, which is so strange, being the CEO. And he made enough money from all the different Y Combinator
He's not in
endeavors.
it for the money, clearly.
Yeah, which is interesting and scary and everything together. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but they had a really good team, and I think that played a role in the early success of it, that helped them get to this point of attracting the absolute best. I mean, Stripe went through there early on, Airbnb, and those stories really just resulted in them being able to attract world-class talent.
Yeah, brilliant. And I love the community aspect that creates in itself, because building your own product, it can be quite lonely if you're a founder of a new startup and you in an encouraging environment where people get you, understand you, and
Yeah,
can hopefully share some of their practical wisdom to get you over the hurdles. I think that's great. And it can create momentum,
yeah.
that kind of fiery atmosphere, talking about fun.
Yeah, and one thing that I think is quite unique about building a startup, and any person watching or listening this that I've done that before would know exactly what I'm talking about. It's substantially harder than you anticipate it to be, right? Because it almost never works out exactly like you think it's going to work out, right?
Mhm.
And that has the potential to get you in quite a negative rut and a bit of a, sometimes you can end up in a bit of a down spiral. It's like nothing's working, right? Everything's falling apart. Our new user numbers are dropping. Everybody hates the product. But if you're surrounded by founders that actually understand, that stuff happens. Like, this is tough. Like, failure is, in the early days, well, actually throughout it, it's the name of the game. Like, it's failing and correcting. That's, or adjusting and hopefully correcting. And being surrounded by people that get that is super valuable.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, you've touched on a few of them already, but maybe you want to give us 5 top tips for a new startup. Help him prevent some of the mistakes you made in your early days. Would one of them be hop onto a boot camp or an accelerator?
Yeah, I think that's always an option. I think do a bit of research and look at some of the startups that went through specific programs to figure out what it's about, and then I would deep dive into the structure of the program. Is it content heavy or is it coaching heavy? So coaching and relationship heavy programs are really good for any founder, and I would highly recommend them. I think one of the things that I think is really important is let me think about this. I think validation, obviously early on, we spoke a bit about that. Like, how do you use different kind of technologies to get going and get some feedback? I think getting customers to pay, super important. I think probably something that's really good and very undervalued in South Africa is having a good co-founder. So identifying early on, like who would want to build it. And then I think from a personal perspective, probably the most important one, and one of the reasons that I've helped me figure out what kind of thing I want to build next, and resulting in me starting a newsletter and working on a podcast and building out those things. A lot of people start a business with an idea, but that idea quickly evolves into becoming them imagining themselves being successful in this role, right? So let's say I had the idea of Uber early in my life before Uber started, and I'm just thinking about this awesome idea, and I can imagine myself, oh man, I'm going to be the CEO of this highly successful tech company. It's going to list on the NASDAQ. This is going to be awesome. Now I'm exaggerating, but the reality is a lot of us do actually forecast, well, what is this going to look like? Where am I going to end? What is my role going to be, right? And what I've realized is thinking about those things can often be misleading and get you to work on something which is probably not going to be enjoyable. So what I've ended up doing the last few years is, instead of taking that approach in deciding what I want to do, I look at the journey of doing something. So in the case of the newsletter, I said, cool, if we're going to be doing a newsletter that does tech and business trends in South Africa, we're going to be sharing multiple times a week. We're going to have to find great content, compile it in a short, condensed way, make it fun, make it great, build a community from there. If I'm going to be doing that for at least a year, what are some of the least enjoyable things that I will be confronted with were I to do this, right? And some of the things I came up with is, sometimes I'm going to have to work late at night to make sure the content's done, right? Sometimes I'm going to run out of ideas, and I'm going to have to get creative and figure out, like, where am I going to find stuff? Like, I need to grow this thing. If people think it sucks, I need to do something about that. All of these really horrible things which could happen if you were to do this. And then I would go through the process of thinking, well, will I actually enjoy solving these challenges? Will it be fun for me to figure these things out? And if the answer to that is, I think it would be fun, right? Then it's probably a good career choice. It's probably a good option to build that startup, to pursue that opportunity, to build that dream. Because at the end of the day, building a business, doing a work, everything we do is filled with challenges, right? We might as well work on the challenges and the things that we enjoy doing, rather than trying to find something that's without challenge, because that's not going to be enjoyable at all. So I think any entrepreneur or any aspiring entrepreneur, before you start, think about this journey and the kind of challenges you'll face. Like if you want to build a startup and go that has the potential to go list, do an IPO, list on the JSE, list on the NASDAQ, or whatever the case may be, fundraising is going to be part of that journey, because you're going to have to grow fast. If you don't think the challenge of raising funding is enjoyable, then that's probably not a good route for you to pursue.
And just to add to that, building a new startup takes time. So if you're not enjoying it, you're essentially signing up for the long haul, because it might be a few years before you reach that level. And it's going to be a lot of
challenges,
blood, sweat, tears, and challenges along the way. So if you're not enjoying it, and if you're not really vested in solving that problem, you're not setting yourself up for a win. So I get that.
Yeah. And then the final thing that I think is, when you get founders and co-founders on board, the initial equity share, I think is often an uncomfortable conversation, but a very important one. And what I like to do is, think about equity more as carrying the weight of what we're building, rather than, we both started this together and we're spending equal time, so let's go 50-50. Right, because that's what a lot of people do. They go, cool, we're going to start this thing together. We're going to be co-founders. Let's go 50-50. If you go 50-50 and the eventual weight that gets carried is not split equally, then you're setting the startup up for a tough time, because the person that needs to carry more to make the thing work will end up being a bit discouraged about the setup and the design. So I think if you're a founder and you're going to lead the thing, you have a co-founder, be bold and make a suggestion around carrying a larger weight of making the thing work, which will keep you up at night and make you work long hours and go the distance. But at the end of the day, I think it's healthy to get one person to really carry the weight and pull the thing through and build the business.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Renier. I think it's really helpful for those launching into something new and knowing that, hey, it's been done before, but leverage practical wisdom. And that's what you're sharing with us. If you had to look back on some of the startups you've mentored, what are some of their biggest reasons for failure? Would you say like the founder gets in the way, they run out of cash, they've got a poor product idea that they've not executed, or pure bad execution on the delivery, or not talking to the right investors? What would you say is the number one thing?
I think all of them actually play a role that you've mentioned. But I think what I've often seen is people find it really hard to validate,
Mm,
and to from validation actually grow from there, right? So validation is really tough for people because this that hustle part that I spoke about earlier, like how do you test the value that you're delivering? That's a really difficult thing to do. I think that's the first thing, and then the second thing, which I think is often not spoken about enough in South Africa, is the ability to market and sell. That's a highly undervalued skill. I would say it's just as important as product, maybe even more important. The other day I saw how Microsoft Teams just completely outgrew Slack and using Microsoft's distribution network. I mean, Microsoft's got distribution now, and there's this saying in experienced startup world. They say when you build your first startup you focus on product, when you build your second startup you focus on sales, when you build your third startup you focus on distribution. So, it's and
very good.
there's some truth in it. Like if you get your distribution sorted and you've got a good way of getting product into people's hand and getting them to buy it, there's a bit of grace and a bit of time to get the product perfect.
Mm,
Now, a lot of people that are product minded would hate me for saying this, but it's almost trying. How do you get both done? So I think the biggest mistake that I've seen a lot of founders make is they don't focus on distribution and sales early enough, and they don't find success in it. They don't view it the same way as building a product. So when you build a product, you put the product out there, you respond to kind of the cues of how users are using it. Are they using it? What are they saying? Are they paying? Those kind of things. And then you pivot, right?
mm,
And marketing and sales is exactly the same thing. So you put a
yeah.
marketing message out there, you see how people are responding. Are you converting? Where do you have big drop off? And then you pivot, you try something else. So, the stuff I'm building, I'm almost changing the website content every 2 weeks. Like we're changing it, we're trying different
A/B
words, we're
testing.
seeing, yeah, we're constantly trying different things.
Yeah.
And it's weird because the things that we think will work almost never works. And the things we thought wouldn't work, but we were just trying something else, often end up being the stuff that works. And then if
Mm,
we really unpack why it works, then we realize, oh yeah, of course it would work because this is the angle. And then
yeah.
from that angle you can figure out how to do other things. So I think they're not spending enough time on marketing distribution, and I think a lot of it's got to do with know-how and experience.
If I could just highlight that, I mean, the fact that you said that it's an underrated skill, sales and marketing, getting your product out there, getting that traction. I mean, I would just encourage people to either upskill in that, find the right people to help you,
Yeah.
or, what you're saying is experiment as well, find out what works, what doesn't work. I think, especially for tech founders who've come around from a technical background with maybe limited exposure in sales and marketing,
Mm,
and think they can just wing it, and only to find that it's not as easy as maybe anticipated. So
mm,
yeah, I love that you're just focusing on that, and I think it's a big part of a successful SaaS
mm,
launch is making sure you got a good marketing strategy and that you are willing to iterate quickly, try stuff, learn, and that
mm.
you've got some good tools to use as you navigate. Like, because one of it is also analytics, right? You need to track what's working, what's not working, so you can
Yeah.
pivot, you can iterate.
Yeah. Yeah, so the best kind of analytics really is how soon can you get into tracking some key metrics, right? So you want to be tracking like even if it's early days and it feels like it's a waste, but as soon as you get some kind of number for a cost of acquisition, right? How much does it cost you to get a new client, right? Get to some kind of idea of what would a lifetime value of a customer be, right? As soon as you get those numbers and you have some kind of funnel down that shows you conversion percentages from someone seeing an ad or Google, or someone seeing a link and clicking on it and going to your website, signing up, paying. If you get that conversion numbers down, well, then you can start iterating, right? Because you can see where people are dropping off. You can see where drop off is higher than other places. And what I've also seen is like founders are always surprised at how low conversion is. Like if you get 100,000 people on your website, which is quite a lot, you might be able to get 2% of that interested, right? So now you've got 2,000 people that have signed up. Okay, but now you have another 90% drop off for people to get people paid. Oh, great. So now you have like a few hundred people paying.
Yes.
Like, well, now all of a sudden you realize, oh, my business doesn't work. It's like, okay,
Yes.
well, back to the drawing board, change the business model that if you are able to hit 100,000 hits on your website and convert it, 2% and 10%, is there a way to make money from that? Because maybe there is. And I think that's sometimes where people, there's no integrated approach between how they think about the business model, the strategy of acquiring customers, how much it costs, and what the product offers. It's really about getting that balance right. Like, if there's only 10,000 customers out there, well, how can you actually speak to every single one of the 10,000 customers? And if you only were to convert 2% or 5% of them, can you actually make money of them? And sometimes you can. Like there's riches and niches. Like people find the most obscure ideas in specific niches and build very successful businesses there with really high margins that just focuses on serving a certain customer segment really well.
Yeah, you've reminded me of one of my failures of launching product in a niche market with limited scope. I think understanding that up front is very good. Doing the maths. What is the potential here?
And that is Andrew, where experience helps a lot, right? So someone that has set up these conversion funnels, that have seen it before, they add a lot of value. So they can tell you realistically upfront, look, you're going to convert at 2% when it comes to these kind of things, or you're probably going to convert 5% or 10%. And then you can actually preempt what your funnel needs to look like, right? So you go, at this specific business model, we will have a lifetime value of R1,000 per customer. If we model it back, you might find, oh, we need 150 million people reading our website monthly. You go, well, that's never going to work. Like, okay, well, now we need to rethink this whole thing, right? But if you've never actually seen a conversion funnel, it's really hard to go, well, how should we price it? How should it work? Because you don't know what's possible in terms of reaching people and converting them. And I think that's really important. That's really helpful to have someone that has done it before.
Yeah, so good. And Renier, let's say you've experimented, you've got a hot one on the line, and you've validated, you now want to get some funding. And so your pitch deck. How important is a pitch deck? What do you want to see in a deck? What don't you want to see?
Yeah, so I think most of the pitch decks that I've seen in South Africa, the first time I see it, it's the idea gets communicated as conservative, right? So they'll speak about the opportunity, but an example of something I saw recently, like someone would say, they're in the business of selling a specific product, right? But if you really take a step back and you think about it strategically, yes, they're selling a product, but they're actually in the process of consolidating a market and making sure they capture the entire audience, or 80% of the audience that wants to buy that specific product. Okay. Now, the first message is I sell a product. The second one is there's a growing market that's growing at double digits per year, and I'm going to consolidate all of this and sell to 80% of them. Okay. And I need to move fast. I need money for this, right? So you can see how the first one is like, oh, so what? You're selling this product. The second one is, wait a minute, you're telling me it's growing double digits. This is the thing. I want to get on board. So I think the first major problem I've seen in South African startups is they're very conservative, and they don't, they almost feel like, but I can't pitch that thing. What if I don't pull it off? I think that's the interesting thing, right? Any person that will invest money in you considers the fact that you might not be able to pull it off. But what is way worse is if you have a plan that even if the plan succeeds, it's not going to move the needle for your investor. Chances are they're not going to bother investing money in your startup anyway. So, we've got this weird thing where startup founders are risk averse to a sense themselves, but they feel bad that they might waste the money of the investor, right? But there's this beautiful dynamic that if you were to take money from an investor, chances are you're going to be accountable towards them and work hard and make sure you give it your absolute best to make it work, which then actually gives it a really good chance of working. So the plan needs to be big, and there needs to be this level of accountability that I'm giving you money and I expect you to give this a good shot, right? That's good for you. So that's the first thing. Other than that, I think some of the other things that are important is really focusing on the problem that you're solving and why it is a problem and why it will be a bigger problem in the future. Like that is stuff that I often see that's missing. Like there's this problem that exists. This is why it's a problem, and it's going to be an even bigger problem going down the line. So all of the good startups, if you look at their decks, they cover that well. And then I think really speaking to why your team's going to win is really important. Like that is absolutely key. And then depending on phase, right? So once you've got a bit of traction, presenting those metrics is really important. Customer acquisition cost, lifetime value. If you do nothing else, then you've got those two metrics, and you can show the growth over time. Then that's really good. A little other thing that I think is incredible hack, if you will, for founders that consider fundraising an option down the line is do a bi-weekly or monthly update to potential investors down the line, right? So I've actually, whenever I see a startup founder doing this, I ask them, put me on a list, because it's interesting, right? So what they'll do in these, like, let's say every last Friday of the month, they'll send an email and they'll list the key metrics. So they'll go, this is our cost per acquisition now, this is our user growth, this is our lifetime value anticipated at the moment. Now, when they do that next month, it's going to be really hard for them to put down numbers that are not better than the previous month, right? Because you feel this pressure as a founder and accountability to go, let me make sure my numbers are better next month, right? So you do extra things. You phone more people, you work a bit harder, and at the end of the day, you get better numbers. Next month, you report that numbers. Do that 3 months in a row, show a bit of growth. I promise you it will be easy to get 5 to 10 meetings with VCs, because all of them will see this guy is one, he's being accountable. So when we invest, we can expect him to actually talk to us and tell us what's going on. 2, we can see growth. So he's making a plan to grow it. And 3, anyway, well, there's 2 things. But the third thing is I would invest in a startup like that, because it communicates a lot of good signs.
I have to pause you there because I think you've dropped 2 absolute pearls there. I think the first one is with your deck, create a sense of FOMO backed by real data. I mean, you're talking about some key metrics, but you want to get investors excited about the future potential and what you can do together. And then secondly, love what you're saying, build a relationship with the right type of investor strategically. And there's different ways to do it. And I love your practical example. But I think creating that network, we talked about community of like-minded founders, but then there's that investment community as well, who can also help you in your journey. So I love that. You're closing both ends of the equation there. So I think that's brilliant. And then maybe, I think for me, I think it always comes back, just rewinding here and just starting where we, at the very beginning, if you like, when you talked about product validation. And I know every product's unique. Are there any like practical tools, frameworks, etc., that maybe you use? Maybe not even necessarily in the product validation, but even in that experimentation phase that you can share with us.
Yeah, so I love using WhatsApp, Google Forms, and Sheets. Those ones, if you can build anything in there. Airtable is also an amazing tool that can help you spin up the equivalent of what would be a database with some attached front end to it, which is really helpful. Recently, we built a first iteration of an app, an MVP, if you will, using Bubble.io, which is a no-code platform, really powerful. Awesome to build progressive web apps in. I know there's another one called Flutterflow, which I haven't checked out, but I believe it's of similar quality. So those ones are really good. I've seen people build things in Notion, like using Notion boards to and publish it to websites, and testing some ideas and concepts. I really believe newsletters are underrated. So a lot of people think it's an email, it's marketing, it's spam, because it's such an intimate space to connect with a user. There's a lot of opportunity to start building a relationship and trust in order to do other things down the line. So an example, I mean, I could probably start a recruitment platform on email, right? So I could go, cool, sign up for my job. Let's say I build a recruitment platform for graphic designers. right? So I go, cool, I've got a recruitment platform for job graphic designers. Sign up for the job placement email, or sign up for the job opportunity email. So which one are you a designer or are you employer? Right. So I send out one email every week. So, and then each of them have a call to action. If you have a job to advertise, click here. Or if you for hire, click here. And they fill in a Google form. And every week I just connect these people with each other. And if they're interested in a candidate, they fill out a Google form. I send them an invoice and I connect it to, right? So I can build this entire business on email. So I think email is very underrated. And I think the like I said, the intimacy of you reading an email, I mean, that's probably the best kind of grab of attention you can get out of a person's day. Like social media, we've kind of become numb to ads that we scroll past, even on LinkedIn. We ignore these things, but when it's an email that you're actually reading, it's quite engaging. So those tools are great. In terms of frameworks, look, I think it's useful for anybody to probably at one point read the Lean Startup. I think the Lean Startup is a very fresh approach of rapidly iterating and learning how to work in environments with low money. Interesting, if you've not read the book, it literally was a concept that was developed out of the 2009 economic downturn. There was not a lot of VC funding around. So people developed this new way of how do you build a startup without VC funding. So, which is obviously very applicable for South African startups. Like there's not a lot of funding around in the early days. So, read the Lean Startup. Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 is really good if you want to think about building businesses that IPO. So it's going to stretch your imagination. It's going to really help you think big. Peter Thiel is amazing at really explaining, the difference between a business and a hyper-growth startup. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with building a solid business. I think we need way more of those than we need startups. But if you're building a startup, I can definitely recommend Peter Thiel's book. And then other than that, I think for any founder, I've mentioned it earlier, but like try and get that conversion funnel as soon as possible. Like, how many people are engaging with your content or your website, or are you engaging with, like, how many are setting up meetings, how are you converting, and get those percentages, because those percentages will indicate where you need to focus on next to make the business move forward. So and that is a Google sheet for the start. Later you can use some fancy tools. But
don't over-engineer it. And I love that. Use Google Forms, use Google Sheets, Google Docs. I've used Bubble O and Flutterflow. I think those are great tools. There's a bit of a upskill journey with Bubble for sure. But even WhatsApp bots now, you can drag and drop and build them out, test them. So there's some great tools to leverage. But I think what you're saying is you don't need to over-engineer it. Validate the idea before you over-invest there. So that's so good. Now, Renier, I know you've kind of poured out your heart and soul to a lot of startups over the years. What is your heart for the South African landscape for the startup community?
Yeah, so I think if you look at South Africa traditionally, like where we come from, we're all aware of our past. But there's two really interesting dynamics if we look at extremes, right? So on the one side we have people that have grew up in poor communities, maybe unemployed parents, maybe they go to school and they're like the first one to finish school, maybe the first one to get a degree, and for them, the most the option that often makes the most sense is take a corporate job, right? But a lot of them are quite entrepreneurial, right? So my heart is really to help and inspire some of those people to consider the entrepreneurial journey as a viable option, not only to create more jobs and do those kind of things, but simply for the enjoyment and the fulfillment that it would bring for them to actually do something that they were destined to do from the beginning, right? So that's the one side. And funnily enough, on the other side, growing up as a middle class white Afrikaans person myself, it was almost the same thing, that you grow up and you drive a Toyota and you bank with Absa and you end up getting a corporate job and working there for 40 years, right? So a lot of those people also don't have the entrepreneurial influence and flair that actually gets them out of school and go, what, I actually don't want to pursue a career at a big corporate. I want to go build a startup. So similarly on that side of the spectrum, also trying to get those people excited about, let's start a business, let's try this thing, and for as far as I'm concerned, share what I've learned as much as possible to see if I can help more people get going and make progress fast. Like I don't make that statement lightly. That's really the pragmatic approach that I apply when working with startup founders, saying, okay, let's focus on the things that will help you make progress fast, because that progress builds momentum builds interest, and positivity, and all of that sets a startup up for just more opportunity. So that's really the heart of it, is help play a role in turning this nation into more of an entrepreneurial nation.
So good. And that's very inspiring. And, I've really enjoyed our chat here. Certainly got the fire cooking for sure, getting hot here, and it's winter. But you've got the open letter. It's the openletter.io. And I love it. Some of your articles there, you're shaking the trees. You don't mind rocking the boat. Some unconventional approach. I like it. I mean, what's the journey been there?
Yeah, so I think for some time I've witnessed this gap in tech reporting, if you will, in South Africa and maybe the African continent, where it always felt like the tech news would cover what's happening in the space, but they wouldn't dive deeper on, okay, but what's actually going on here, right? Like, what's the story behind the story? Why is someone investing in these kind of startups? Like, why is this company succeeding to begin with? Like, what's the trend? Like, what are some of the other trends that other startups could capitalize on or could jump on? And that's the first thing. And the second thing is, I always thought that the style of writing was quite heavy. It's quite hard to read through entire articles. So I ended up reading headlines, because I'm like, I've gotten used to the article wouldn't tell me much more than what the headline would tell me anyway. And I felt like that was a problem. And I've got a broad interest field. I like a lot of different things, and I like to connect dots between between tech and economics and social aspects and all of these things. And I thought, what about we start a newsletter, which started out as an email that went out every Thursday at 6 a.m. And we cover some topics which we think are trendy and will have an impact on people working in a space. So it's really for anybody that works in tech or works in proximity to tech to have one place of really good, well-written, engaging, fun. We've got a lot of memes. We make it fun and interactive to read, a lot of graphs and visuals. Like one place that you don't have to spend hours on Twitter to figure out, like, or on LinkedIn or on all these websites to figure out what's going on in tech in South Africa. So you read that newsletter and you're kind of up to date, and maybe you get inspired with some ideas. That's our hope, that you read it and you get some ideas and it triggers some thoughts around opportunity. But if nothing else, you'll definitely be one of the smartest guys at the water cooler, because
some great conversation points, eh?
There's some great conversation points. And all of us that work kind of in the space, we typically have friends that also work in tech or in proximity to tech. So it really is conversation starters. Like, you'll read things that when you see your mates, you can chat about that. So we started that newsletter on Thursdays. We're now running Tuesdays and Thursdays, shorter. So it's about a 5-minute read. It goes out in the mornings. We've launched a online LinkedIn live chat, which we do once a month with an interesting person in tech innovation space. We've done 3 of them. We might do more going forward. And then we've got some plans to build that out into a community. I think the startup space in South Africa is quite fragmented. People are all doing their own things everywhere, and Cape Town doesn't really mingle with Joburg, and we've got all these nonsense going on. So one of the missions that we're on is really saying, okay, can we remove some of the fragmentation that's in the space and bring a lot of these people together and build and share together? And once that is in place, who knows where that can go? Maybe a fund, maybe some other things. But yeah, learning a lot about acquiring customers that flow that we spoke about, like the journey from conversion. Learning a lot about content positioning, learning a lot about email tech. Like, if your emails go to spam, I'm your guy. I can tell you why.
Yes.
So a lot of those things, but having a lot of fun in the process. And yeah, anybody that works in tech, go check it out. I won't take offense if you read it twice and unsubscribe, but give us a shot.
Yeah, so good, man. The openletter.io, you can sign up there and be inspired by some great content. So, Renier, you're on fire. Thank you for investing in startup community, making it better in South Africa, making it strong, sharing your wisdom. So people can obviously find you on your website, find you on LinkedIn, get hold of
Yeah.
this man. He wants to help you. He wants to see you succeed. Renier, thanks again for your time. So good.
Okay.
Pearls of
Thanks, Andrew.
wisdom.
Thanks, man.